Fairy tales are near and dear to many of our hearts. They were an integral part of our childhoods, capturing our imaginations, many of which being adapted into amazing, heartfelt films by Disney and other such companies. But the origins of these tales are far, far darker than you may imagine. The modernized, feel-good stories are a far cry from the horrors that these tales originally stemmed from. Here are 5 classic fairy tales with horrific backstories. Number 5. Hansel and Gretel. Even as far as modern fairy tales go, Hansel and Gretel is pretty dark, what with an evil witch that wants to eat them up. But the origins of this story are so much darker. In the original, the children are not Hansel and Gretel, but Jean and Jeannette. Their parents were very poor, so they did the only sensible thing and dumped their children in the forest to die. Charming, I know. They then stumbled upon a red little cottage. Not the gingerbread house made of goodies, but good enough. Inside lived a kindly old woman who took them in, but she warned them that her husband was a cruel and wicked man, and he would eat them up if he caught them. Before the children could leave, however, her husband returned home, and he was none other than the devil himself. The old woman tried to help them by hiding them. However, the devil sniffed them out and then locked them in a barn to fatten them up before feasting on them. They managed to fool him into thinking that they weren't gaining any weight by sticking twigs and rat tails through the barn door, claiming that they were actually their skinny fingers. But he figured it out and then demanded that they sit upon sawhorses while he stormed off in anger. Sawhorses, by the way, were used as a rather cruel torture device at one point. Certainly not something you'll see in the next Disney tale. Well, this is where the tale gets even darker. The children pretended that they did not know how to sit on a sawhorse, so they tricked the old woman to come out and show them. While she was distracted, they slit her throat. Might be a little intense for someone who was likely just trapped in an abusive relationship. It's not like they could have helped her flee with them or anything. But then again, these old fairy tales were brutal. Of course, they couldn't leave empty-handed, so they stole some silver and gold before fleeing back to the same parents who left them to die there in the first place. Not quite sure what the moral of this one was supposed to be, but it's clearly not a bedtime story you'll be wanting to read to children anytime soon. Number 4. Sleeping Beauty. Though Disney spins this tale in a romantic light, the origins of this story are anything but. In one of the earliest versions of the story, Sun, Moon, and Talia, the events transpire entirely different. Talia does not prick her finger upon a spinning wheel, but instead gets a flaxseed stuck under her fingernail. This causes her to fall down, apparently dead. Her father could not bear the idea of her being gone, so he laid her body in the bed of one of his various estates in the woods. I'm not sure why he thought placing what he assumed to be a dead body in the open to decay all over the bedsheets was a good idea, but then again, that's the lesser of the messed up things in this story. Sometime later, a king from another country was passing through the woods on a hunting trip and discovered Talia. He tries to wake her, but fails and assumes she is indeed dead. So naturally, he then forces himself on her, because everyone in this messed up story seems to be bent on violating corpses. It's not true love's kiss that wakes Talia. She had become pregnant and went through labor all while still asleep. It was one of her 2 babies suckling on her finger, dislodging the seed that did the trick. In a messed up twist of fate, she somehow falls in love with the king who had violated her, but he was already married. The queen got wind of this and in jealousy ordered the babies to be cooked for her to eat. Hearing of this, the king stopped her and then burned her alive, to then marry Talia. Happily ever after, am I right? Number 3. The Little Mermaid. Yet another story that modern adaptations have taken the bite out of. The original tale by Hans Christian Andersen was not a love story with a happy ending. They started similar enough. A little mermaid that desires to give up her life in the sea to walk upon the land. But what Disney fails to mention in their retelling is that not only did the sea witch take her voice as payment for her human legs, but she also cursed her to unbearable pain. Every step she took was like walking upon sharp knives. And it gets even darker. A stipulation to their agreement stated that her curse would break and she could live on dry land freely if the handsome prince fell in love with her and married her. But if he did not, she would have to kill him, or she herself would die. Despite the agony that pierced her legs, she danced again and again with the prince, trying to win him over. But all her suffering was in vain. The prince had fallen in love with a different woman. When it came time for the mermaid to kill him, she couldn't bring herself to do it. Desperately running back to the sea that was once her home, her body dissolved into sea foam. Number 2. Cinderella. The tale of Cinderella follows surprisingly close to the source material in the modern-day adaptations. Cinderella's father remarried a cruel stepmother with 2 wicked stepsisters, and Cinderella was forced to wear rags and wait upon the family. When the family was invited to attend the prince's ball, the stepmother forbade Cinderella from going because she had nothing to wear and her chores were not done. Cinderella worked hard to finish her chores in time, and seeing this, her stepmother then smashed 2 plates of lentils on the floor and demanded Cinderella clean them up while she and the stepsisters left for the ball. Cinderella ran crying out to the site of her mother's grave and prayed for her fortune to change. It was not a fairy godmother that appeared to her, but several heavenly white birds. They gave her a beautiful gown and golden shoes, but told her to return before midnight. For the next 3 nights, she visited the prince and he fell in love with her. On the final night, she had to flee as midnight approached and lost one of her golden slippers. The hunt to find a match was then on. Hearing of this news, the stepmother took drastic measures. This is where things get messed up. Knowing that her daughter's feet were too big to fit, she demanded that they cut off their toes and their heels in order to fit. Not sure why she thought the prince wouldn't notice their bloody mangled feet. But the prince did indeed know they were not the right girl and eventually found Cinderella. As an ever so cheerful wedding gift, the same magical white birds that gave Cinderella her dress also pecked out her stepsister's eyes so they'd have to live the rest of their lives blind and unable to walk. Don't you love happy endings? Number 1. Bluebeard. No matter which way you look at this horrific fairy tale, there's simply no way to sugarcoat this one. Possibly one of the most disturbing fairy tales ever, Bluebeard pushes the limit between fairy tales and horror stories. This story revolves around a young woman being courted by a nobleman with a distinct blue beard. Suspicion swirls around him as he's been married many, many times, and all of his wives kept disappearing. However, the young woman sweeps these concerns aside as he woos her with lavish parties and riches, eventually convincing her to marry him. Upon moving into his palace, she is forbidden from exploring a certain room on the upper floor. However, one day while he is out, the young woman's curiosity gets the better of her, and she steals the key to the room and goes to investigate. To her horror, she finds the room completely soaked in blood, and worse yet, the bodies of all of Bluebeard's past wives are hanging from meat hooks. In terror, the woman flees the room, locking the door and replacing the key. She tells her sister of what she has discovered, and the two plan to sneak her out of there that day. But before they could leave, Bluebeard returned. Without realizing it, upon leaving the room, the woman had gotten blood on the key, and seeing this, Bluebeard knew what she had done. He charged down to murder her, but before he could, her several brothers stormed the palace and saved her from being beheaded. I'm pretty sure there's a moral in there about not letting money blind you to people's intentions, but I'd imagine children would be far too traumatized from the story to really get it. So, were any of these stories' dark origins a surprise to you? What's your favorite fairy tale with messed up roots? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more like it, please consider leaving a like. And if you're new here, I invite you to subscribe and join the family. Anyway, that's all for now. See you next time, and stay creepy.